Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Jason Kelly.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
And welcome to The Deal. On this episode, Candace Parker. All right, Alex, we are catching Candace at an amazing moment in her career. She's stopped playing. She's moved on to being a business person, full stop. Reminds me a little bit in her ambition of somebody I know who used to play baseball.
You know, I really connected with her. I felt like very much like I was looking in the mirror a little bit. She has such a great vision, a clear, big vision, but she's also a media star. I believe she'll be a future owner in the NBA and WNBA. She has a wonderful relationship with Adidas, where they made her the president of basketball for women's basketball. And if she was a stock, Jason, I would buy as much as I can.
This is a good one, folks. Up next, Candace Parker. All right, please introduce yourself.
I'm Candace Parker. So happy to join you all.
And how would you describe what you're doing these days?
I'm more outside the lines, I would say. I think my whole goal is to continue to grow the game of women's basketball and women's sports in general. And so was named Adidas women's basketball president recently this year. Just kind of like the business of sports, if you will. And then also doing a little broadcasting with the guys on TNT and the NBA.
Early in your career, you grow up in Illinois, you end up at University of Tennessee, which is already iconic at that moment. One could argue you made it more so, a couple national championships. You play for Pat Summitt. We talk a lot about coaches being influential. I mean, Alex talks all the time about how pivotal that was for him. When you think about the pantheon of coaches, Pat Summitt is there across all sports. Tell us about meeting her and what convinced you to go to Tennessee, because that clearly is, when you talk about deals, like making that deal really changes the trajectory of your career.
What was crazy was, it was in between the lines. Obviously I wanted to play basketball. I didn't go to Tennessee to be a writer. I went there with the mindset that I wanted to play basketball as a career. She was landing from speaking to the CIA when I flew in for an unofficial visit. Let that set in. And I remember my dad just kind of sitting back in his chair. And my dad is the one that is the visionary and he's the one that was you're 6'4", but you're still going to be able to dribble, shoot, pass. We're not going to stand you by the basket. And in other ways, I think it was the same. He wanted someone that would teach me not just basketball and the X's and O's, but about after the ball stops bouncing. And those lessons that you learn now are going to be applied later. And Coach Summitt was the perfect example for that. I wanted to be a mom and to watch her just balance being a mom as well as being one of the best, if not the best coach ever, and win national championships. Her as a human, growing the game of women's basketball. I mean, she was at the forefront of Title IX before it was popular. So just being able to see all of that at a young age and then now be able to learn those lessons through that, I think that's what got and sold myself and my parents.
I get really nerdy about this. Like Jason said, because my father left at the age of 10, mentors and coaches kind of, formulated my life really and really made such a big impression and inspiration in my life. But specifics, is there one or two things you can share? Because we didn't play for Coach Summitt.
Yep.
That really motivated you, that to this day, that you still carry with you?
100%. The biggest thing with Coach Summitt is she was the same person when she was hanging banners as when she was going through rough patches. And, she has a definite dozen principles that she would give all of us when we first arrived at Tennessee, and she would check back in with us every year. And every year she would assign a different definite dozen. Well, I got the same one every year. It was handle success as you handle failure. And it was the opposite of what you think. I think I beat myself up when I miss a shot or when I'm not successful or when I lose a game. But it was you move on real quick when you succeed. And so it was these lessons every single year. I would come back and get different lessons from things that I observed about her. But Coach Summitt just had a presence. I think she demanded greatness and respect, but she was one of the best listeners. And I think that's what set me up a little bit, because the expectation was all coaches were like that. Because I played for my dad, my high school coach, and Pat Summitt. So the expectation was like, this is how it was, but it wasn't. She would come to timeouts and be like, Parker, what do you think? Right? This coach is asking me what I think. And then sometimes we would do what I would say, or sometimes we wouldn't. But the times we would do it or not do it, I would still feel ownership and feel heard. That's what separates her, is she was one of the best listeners and would really take what you said into account.
Talk to us about the game of basketball at that level at that moment, because that was when, if you were coming up, that was when you were going to be the most popular. So what was it like in that era? What do you remember most distinctly about those days?
It was before all the Instagram and Facebook, so I look at that as like the good old days a little bit. Playing basketball at that time, it was like the intimate, you watching television or you're at the game. And that's how you kind of were able to be a part of what we were doing. But I will say, I think it was Diana Taurasi said to me, and this is when we played together in Russia. She said, your heyday is when you're playing in college. And then people slowly but surely forget about you as you progress in the WNBA. And I just thought it was so weird, because it's like opposite for the men. We were winning national championships. We were rock stars on the road. I mean, we sold out arenas, and we had the highest attendance at home games. And I mean, playing in front of 24,000 screaming fans at Thompson Bowling Arena in Knoxville on a random Sunday against Vanderbilt, or against UConn on national television with that rivalry. And I think it set the stage for solidifying that women's basketball was special. But it also was like, this is what we're capable of if it's properly invested in. And I think that was the whole separation. I don't think it was the talent. I think it was the proper investment that we needed within the WNBA.
And when you were in college and you were playing in front of sold-out crowds and you guys were rock stars, did Candace Parker already start thinking about life after WNBA and being a rock star in the world of business and where you are today? How far back do you go back to visualizing the future?
Well, for, I would say, a semester and a half, I was a finance major because I really wanted to do that. And then Coach Summitt wouldn't change practice, and I needed a prereq, and I was like, I'm not staying here another year and a half for finance. But yeah, I always wanted to do and be a part of and learn outside of basketball. And, that includes asking questions. I think immediately in broadcasting, just learning about media, learning how to communicate, learning how to be behind the camera and what goes on and what the expectations are, but also just asking why, and when you're walking into meetings, you sign a business manager or a finance team, like learning to ask questions, I think was my in to a lot of different things. And I learned that early on in college, where people like answering questions. I think a lot of people are scared to ask them, but if you ask, usually there's a relationship that's developed, questions are answered, and you learn more. And so I think that was kind of the more questions I ask, the more lanes are going to open. And so that's kind of what I did early on.
Where does that come from, do you think? Because there are a lot of people in your shoes who would have been content, especially given the level of fame that you're achieving at the college level, like, this is awesome. I'm just going to do this as long as I can. What gave you that need, it sounds like, to look around the corner and to think about what was next? Is that from growing up? Like, where does that come from?
I'm like the annoying little sister that always asks why. I have 2 older brothers. They're 8 and 11 years older than me, my heroes. I always asked why, and we always debated. And so I think that was also, people are like, how do you sit at the desk with Chuck and Shaq and Kenny and D-Wade and, Jamal and all of those guys? How do you sit there? And I'm like, that was our every Saturday and Sunday in our house.
Right.
And so I think it just comes from wanting to ask. I think being okay, being embarrassed at times if people are like, how does she not know this? But a lot of times I learned when I'm asking questions, people might not want to ask, but they didn't know the answer either. And so I don't know, that came from being on team sports as well. Like, I would raise my hand and be like, I don't understand the scout, or I don't understand the defensive coverage. And so it just kind of became a habit of just wanting to know and wanting to know more.
And given what you said, and Diana Taurasi's observation was exactly right at that moment, like, this is it, like, or at least this is the peak. Given that, what are the decisions, or how do you make the decisions coming out of college as to what's going to happen next?
When you're young, and especially I had my daughter after my first season in the WNBA, I think you're automatically thinking about your brand and getting better at your sport, but you're also thinking about your finances and making sure that you can take care of your family the best way you can. I was fortunate to be able to have longstanding partners. Adidas, I've been with 16 years of my career. Gatorade, I mean, you go down the line. Karma, like, I've been blessed to have the ability to do other things outside of the lines. But overseas was forefront because that was the way that you could take care of your family at a different level. And that was the sacrifice, but it was also a foresight of like, okay, later on, I'm able to do the things that I want to do. I just have to, kind of grind right now. And so that coming out was like, you play in the WNBA, that was a summer job. Yes, the endorsements came for that, and there was money made off of endorsements and things like that. But direct WNBA, I mean, you look at my rookie salary, I think it was like $56,000, $57,000. And as a kid, you always dream of going to the WNBA. And I remember telling kids, like, no, you should dream to go overseas. Like, this is, that's actually the dream. That's how you take care of your family.
I don't want to get too far away from this idea of what coming into the pros was like. And I'm going to turn this on you for a second. I mean, can you imagine if you're getting drafted? So you got this contract with the Mariners, but the Mariners are like, yeah, we're going to give you a few bucks, but you actually need to go to like Japan and play the. I mean, that
would be wild.
That would be wild.
Yeah.
Did it feel wild? I mean, or did it just feel like this is what you do?
At the time, all of us were saying that we hope at some point in time we don't have to go overseas.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you go where the money is. And it was just, the ability to take care of my family. And over there, I played for one of the best clubs in Russia. We had chefs, we had drivers, we flew private, amazing apartments. And so it was like, yes, it was a sacrifice, but you were also I was able to capitalize on the things that I was missing in the league, like the things we didn't have. And it was just unfortunate that we had to go thousands of miles away to actually get, equitable pay and to be taken care of, like we should.
Yeah. And by the way, also pointing out, you're in the WNBA, you're both the Rookie of the Year and the MVP. So you're not a scrub player. I mean, you're literally the best player, and this is the economics of the situation. So fast forwarding just for a minute, do you have some measure of cognitive dissonance then, looking at where the W is now and thinking about what it was not that long ago? You're not an old person.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
How do you process that?
Well, I'm pissed that they started chartering the year I retired. I'm not going to lie. Because our back-to-backs used to be, we would play, and then we'd go to sleep, and then we'd wake up to take the 6 a.m. flight, and then we'd still play the next day.
Yeah.
So, it makes me a little angry because it would have been nice to, for your body to kind of catch that charter flight. But, I mean, I feel like all of us feel a responsibility and a part of the growth that's happening right now. I mean, the league was hard for so many years, and that's what I said when I retired. I hope that it's not so hard for the next, so difficult. I wanted to get better, but finding a gym that's open, that can be open, it was so hard out in LA. And I lived out here because we didn't have a practice facility. So more so, I'm mad because I'm thinking of how much better I could have been if I had an off season, if I didn't have to go overseas. And I could have put weight on, and I could have bulked up in the weight room and focused on what I wanted to improve on. But I also look at the doors that are opening now and where the sport is. And, I play with a lot of angry old heads is what we call them. I work with a lot of angry old heads. I don't want to be the angry old heads. So I'm not going to be, Shaq coming in like, oh, man up. I'm not going to be that. I'm going to be the person that's like, I'm happy where it's at. But man, like, if I would have had NIL and college, you got to think about what if occasionally. And, but I'm happy for the doors that are open right now, and I hope to be a part of the process of continuing to open those doors.
What do you make of NIL? I mean, you've lived a very different existence, as
different.
you said.
Papa John's for for pregame meals and trying to figure it
wow.
out. Yeah, like they couldn't feed us when I was there. It was illegal. You couldn't feed us.
And you have a sold out building.
And number 3 jerseys,
Right.
walking around. But I think that this is an exciting landscape because really athletes are brands. And to be able to see individuals like Caleb Williams that are actually capitalizing on opening up private equity firms and, fresh out of college, investing in acquiring equity in something at a young age, I think that that's where you really see generational, not just wealth, but change. And so for so long, I think we've idolized, rock stars, movie stars, all that. Now it's athletes.
Mm-hmm.
It's athletes. Like it's athletes with some of the biggest following on Instagram. And so I think it has a lot to do with why the NCAA knew that they had to allow NIL inside. Now, it's a wild, wild west, and I think there's a lot of things that need to be figured out. But I'm hoping Tennessee can pay a bag so that we can continue to be.
You speak about the NCAA. I'm going to let you put the commissioner of the NCAA and the head of NIL. If there's 1 or 2 adjustments that you can make, because there's so many things that are good, and you mentioned there's some challenges, what are some of the quick fixes that you would do now and maybe some long-term?
Well, long-term, I think we're taking care of the front and center athletes, but there's very few front and center forward-facing that would have probably made their money anyway. And I think over time, as we're looking, the WNBA, the MLB, you always got to take care of your median income. Like you always have to take care of the middleman. So where is that within the NCAA? I think that's something. Health insurance, whether it's, stipends, whether it's, are they actually going to be considered a union at some point? I think those are all things that should come up for conversation just because the NCAA is a business and we're seeing it's necessary to be able to take care of your athletes, not just the ones that are going to be able to sign the endorsement deals and get the national commercials.
So one of the key decisions you clearly make is getting into business with Adidas. As an endorser, initially, they come in and they want you to endorse their product. How did that happen? Because that feels like, we talk about signature deals. That feels like a signature deal for you.
It's so interesting. They sent me a pair of red Tracy McGrady's when I was 14 years old.
People are now Googling Tracy McGrady.
Yeah. Better know Tracy
Sorry,
McGrady.
Tracy.
You better know T-Mac. And I thought I was the coolest person in the world. And I wore those everywhere. And then it was the pro models that came out. And I had the green and the red one. And then the next year they sponsored my team, my high school team.
No kidding.
And so they sent us a whole box of things. I got exclusive stuff. And then I went to the University of Tennessee, which was also Adidas at the time.
Oh.
And so it was this relationship, and I knew everyone there, and I felt comfortable. And I think when I did sign with them, when I became a pro, we knew each other very well. So we worked through the kinks. We worked through me going overseas. We worked through, obviously, my pregnancy, my injuries, and I stuck with them through some things as well. And so I think when it becomes a partnership and a collaboration where you feel heard, you're trying to really genuinely enjoy the brand. Everybody knows in my house, don't come in my house with Nikes. Don't come in my house. Leave the Nikes at the door. It's a joke. Yeah, it's a joke in my house. And it's been amazing to have a partnership with them and to grow through all phases of life. And I think now, sitting as Adidas Women's Basketball's president, I feel like a responsibility. It's an ownership. It's a part of me. I feel part of the brand. And I'm just trying to grow it from a different, vantage point.
Tell us about that moment where they call and say, we want you to take this role. This is not just we want you to wear a shoe, not just a signature shoe, but talk about that moment where they say, we want you to have a different job.
It was so interesting because, again, I'm planning for the next phase of life, but I really want to know what goes into building a brand, building a collection. So as we were doing my collections that were coming out, the Ace collections, and it was, a clothing line, I wanted to be in the meetings. I wanted to be in the planning. I wanted to talk to Dick's Sporting Goods where it would be carried. I wanted to be in the design. I gave feedback, like real feedback about shoes. I didn't just come in to check a box like I came in the office. And so I think through those conversations, again, developed a lot of relationships. Nobody is at Adidas now that was with me when I first signed. So it's all new people. It's just new relationships that were developed and the trust and all of that. And so this was kind of in the making, I felt. I didn't know it was going to be like this, but I'm always super passionate about growing the brand and especially growing it for women's basketball. And so when they kind of made the pitch to me, it was a random meeting. I went down to LA, their office here, and it was a video and they had like this briefcase. I was like, what's going on? And and on, they pull out the jacket and on it, it's like Adidas, women's basketball president. And I was like, wait, what?
Wow.
And they were like, we would love for you to be a part of the
They
brand
made you a
still.
jacket?
They
That's
made
so
me a
cool.
jacket, a Letterman's jacket. And it was really cool because they were like, we want you to continue to grow the game, but just differently.
So Candace, I've been in those meetings too, but with the rival company up in the same way, up there in the Pacific Northwest, in Portland.
Yep.
So you go through the presentation. Walk us through how do you go from that presentation to actually putting some type of term sheet in front of you and your agent? And does it go back and forth a couple of times? Do you redline it? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think there are questions all the time about, filling in, defining a role. And I think that's the biggest thing. But at the end of the day, yes, we did go back and forth. But I think having trust in somebody to fulfill promises and having a reputation and having experience with them, you trust that even if everything isn't, bold line or whatever, that they're going to deliver on what they're going to say. And so I think that was the thing. I mean, we agreed in principle pretty quickly, but it was just the underlying things of what, I wanted to do with this role and what was expected of me and, what I would need to be able to succeed and to really continue to grow it from that perspective. And honestly, I can say from day one, the first meeting we've had, it's been amazing. My imprint won't be on it until 2025 because you know how the brand works.
Yeah.
It's a year ahead. But already, like, just the conversations that we've had and, our focus and, what our intentions are. I think grassroots, you see a kid like me at 14 years old put on some T-Max, it had a lasting impact.
Yeah.
And so I think we're realizing, not to give away secrets to the, to the other brand, but we're realizing, like, it's super important to find that 14-year-old kid.
Yeah. And so I don't want to get too far away from this signature shoe conversation. Swap some notes here. What was it like when that happened? When you put on your own shoe?
It was nothing like it. I think I loved the design process because I was a sneakerhead back in the day. I wore the KGs when he was there. I wore the pro models, the T-Max, the AIs, all that. So I was always into like, okay, so you're able to start from the ground up. There's no design and you can design whatever you want. And at the time, it's so funny. The first thing I said, I was like, I like Skittles. I want to have like smashed Skittles on the bottom of the shoe. And they came in with like 15 designs of like smashed Skittles. Like what would that look like and spark colors and all this stuff. So I had the coolest experience creating the shoe. And then when it finally came to life and I actually put it on, I think I was more excited because I had replica shoes for all my nieces and nephews and my daughter.
Nice.
And so it was really cool to see like my shoe and what came about from that on other people's feet.
What was it like for you?
I remember one of the kind of meetings of creative where they were asking me, what's your favorite car? What's your favorite watch? What do you order at Starbucks? I'm like, what are all these questions?
Yeah.
But they asked me like 50 questions and then they came up with this awesome killer shoe. And then that led to my first commercial with Nike where I took the shoe and put it in a blender and then I drank the drink. And it was a dream come true. I mean, I'm a kid from Miami. My mom collected food stamps. And here I am wearing my own Nike sneakers with my teammate Griffey.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I felt like, Jordan and Pippen because they both had their sneakers and he and I had our own sneakers. So I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What was that feeling like the first time you saw somebody else wear it? Like when you just were driving in your car and you just looked and you saw somebody or whatever, like what was that feeling
I wish
like?
I had an iPhone so I can take a picture.
Yeah.
But I told a bunch of people, I don't think they believed me, but the first time was like, it's a surreal moment. You're like, how are they wearing my sneakers? That's pretty cool. And it just gives you a sense of pride, for sure, and a real connection to the company, that they believe so much in you. I mean, think about it. Adidas can pick anybody in the world, and they pick Candace Parker to be the president of women's basketball. You have a fiduciary duty to that company. And the fact you've been with them for 16 years, it's amazing. I've been with Nike for 25 years, right? That's all I've worn. And loyalty is a big thing to me. So it's been a great relationship for me as well.
Amazing.
So when you think about kind of this next chapter, it's something you've been working on for a while, but I want to read a paragraph that jumped out at me, and I read it to Alex earlier. I'm going to read it back to you. So this is a paragraph from your retirement announcement on Instagram. I'm quoting here. In the meantime, no, all caps, I'm a businessman, not a businessman. This is the beginning. I'm attacking business, private equity, ownership. I will own both an NBA and WNBA team, broadcasting, production, boardrooms, beach volleyball, dominoes. This is apparently an aside, I think, to your wife. Sorry, babe, it's going to get more real. With the same intensity and focus I did basketball. Wow. Break that down for us. That's like a mission statement, I think. Unpack it.
I always believe in speaking things into existence, and that is a goal of mine, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I think everybody assumes, WNBA players own a WNBA team, but I'm a huge fan of the NBA as well, and I think that that's a possibility as well. And I think just taking that mindset of being an athlete on the court, you set all of those microscopic and telescopic goals, but really the work comes behind figuring out how I'm going to do that. And every single day, putting yourself in a position to be better than you were the day before. I really think it's just recreating the blueprint of what you had as an athlete. I mean, you look at seasons, you figure out what your goals are. Obviously, the championship would be owning a team. And
we know some people.
we know a couple people, people that have and people that will, hopefully. But I think it's the relationships, it's learning. It's so crazy because, I'm a huge Malcolm Gladwell. Like, I read all his books.
Yeah.
And you talk about outlier, and it talks about 10,000 hours. You talk about the time. And I think, you've experienced this with your kids as well, where you're trying to teach them that if you put the time in, you can have these God-given abilities. But if you put the time in, then you're going to be better, right? You can turn into greatness just from putting the time. And I think athletes, when they end a career, you forget how much time you put in to be really good at your sport. Mm-hmm. And I have to remind myself that I need to put the time and the energy and the effort. And sometimes that's goal setting. And sometimes that's like now my Google Calendar, it's for real. Like I have to stay, I have to stay on top of that because that's what I want to do. And so that's going to get me there.
So Candace, let's talk about that. You talk about the reps, and I'm a big believer of that. I've always said, I'm not going to be the smartest. I'm not going to be like, obviously I didn't go to any Ivy League college. I didn't go to college. So I'm going to be the hardest working, first one there, last one to leave. And I'm going to grind and I'm going to study. But talk about studying for you. How do you make up the time, because you were playing basketball, to compete in the world of the Mark Lazars, the David Blitzers? What kind of studying do you do? And walk me through your mindset of how do you fill that gap?
I love asking people for 20 minutes of your time bi-monthly. I just need 20 minutes of your time. And can we go over this deck? And you teach me what you saw, or past decks that have been successful, or companies that you've passed on. What did you look at? What did you see? Mm. What did the margins look like? What made you lean towards this? What are the qualities? Because here's the thing, you can probably, I always say this, when I'm scouting somebody in basketball, there's that like intangible that your brain's putting together, but it's all things that you've learned over time. How do they move? Like, how are they handling? Are they looking up? Are they seeing the floor? Are they making their teammates better? All those things. And I think in business, it's like that as well, especially when you're picking between, apples to apples, and you're picking between people, because honestly, that's what it is. It's all relationships.
Yeah.
Right? You can have an amazing idea and the wrong person running it. And you can have an okay idea and the right person's running it. And I think that's what I'm learning the most from mentors like Mark Lazar, and from, I've involved with other individuals. You talk about Andy Spellman, you talk about Mark Roberts, down the line. But the thing that I'm noticing the most is how important it is for me to also get in rooms with women and learn and listen and be a part of that network and growth as well. So
Awesome.
I think just picking their brain, asking questions, and not being afraid to ask for time.
Yeah.
Love that.
Let's talk about Mark Lazar for a second, because off camera, I got a little intel, which your business relationship with him began, I believe, with you giving him a black eye.
I crossed him first, then I gave him a black eye. No, I'm just kidding. We were playing in a celebrity game at NBA All-Star, and Mark was playing, and I did my patent over the head fake, and he turned and looked, and by the time he reacted, I had already gone, and so we bumped heads, and his daughters thought
Proving that you were a professional basketball player. He
definitely.
was a professional basketball team owner.
Yeah, he was an owner. He was an owner on that team, and it was hilarious. And so his daughters thought it was the funniest thing. And so ever since then, every NBA All-Star, we'd always seek each other out. We would always find each other. I'd see his daughters. We'd talk. We'd hang out. We'd go to dinner. All those things. And then about, 2022, 21, when the Bucks were, about on the cusp of winning a championship, he's like, we got to get you, you're Bulls fan. I'm a Bulls fan.
Mm-hmm.
It was great in the 90s. Now, not so much. We got to get you out here to a game. And I'm like, I'm never coming to a Bucks game. I can't do it. Well, he convinced me. I drove from Chicago to the Bucks, and just seeing the environment, being able to see Deer District, all the things that he's done, it was unbelievable. And just to continue to talk to him and catch up with him and do it was amazing. And then, he started, Avenue Capital Sports, and then he called me one day and was like, I would love for you to be involved in it. And Mark is one of those people that it's super special. I think we have an amazing friendship, but also everything he says, he does. And I think that's the thing that I respect most about Mark Lazar.
He's a great mentor. I got to share one Mark Lazar story
please.
just to tell you what an incredible guy he is. Back in 11, a couple years after we won the title with the Yankees, we had a date where he was going to mentor me, and we were going to go over my real estate deck, right? And I said, I'll probably be there on 11. I said, Yankee Red Sox games usually go a little longer, so maybe 11:30. Well, of course, we're going to extra innings. It's like 1 a.m. I'm texting him. I said, hey, rain check, I'm sure you're sleeping. He goes, no, come over. I'm like, well, first of all, you're up. So I knock on his house. He's got his pajamas on. And we spend the next hour and a half on his couch, 1-on-1, and he's going red marking my deck. And then he's been a long-time investor of mine. We've been partners in several other things, and I'm sure we'll do other things. But when you have mentors like that are really special, that's just an example. Nobody knows that story, but you know stories like that, and I've experienced stories like that. It's pretty cool.
But that's what separates it, if you think about it. Like, everybody wonders why Steph can shoot like he shoots. Yes, it's God-given talent, some of it, but who's the one that's in the gym getting the most shots up? And it's guys like Mark that put the time in, put the energy in, do the extra. I think that I'm learning that are successful, but he's a nice guy. I think that's what separates him, is he actually genuinely cares about you as a human and what you do and the decisions that you make.
Talk to us about women's sports. It's something, you started this conversation talking about being committed to women's basketball and women's sports. What needs to happen next for women's sports from a business perspective?
We've always talked about properly investing in a product. I mean, we've been screaming from the rooftop that scared money doesn't make money, that you actually have to properly invest in not only the sport and the business plan, but also the athletes. The thing I respect most about the NBA is Adam Silver. He calls me. I'm just like, he asks questions to me, and I'm not part of the NBA. He asks the stars of the NBA questions. Hopefully. LeBron is on speed dial. He talks to him. He has a relationship with them. And I think that within women's sports for so long, it's been a separation of investment and product for a very long time. And I think the first conversation I had with Mark was, what are you dedicating? What percentage of the fund are you dedicating to women's sports? Because this isn't something that I want to come into and just not make an impact on something that's I'm passionate about. And he's like, we're going to invest in women's sports and we're going to do it. And this was before this last year and a half, which was a unique timing. And I said, okay, But I need more than an investment of money. I need time as well. Because you can't just invest in a product that you've never seen. So I was like, come to the Final Four. I have a suite. Come sit with me at the women's Final Four and let's watch Iowa and South Carolina go at it. And he came, you know, and he was there and, you know, met everybody, saw the environment. And I think that within women's sports, what we need is people that are knowledgeable about the growth of it, but also we need the billionaire owners that are going to come in and actually make an impact and grow the game again.
And so what's your role in that?
I think my role in that is understanding through past growth. And that's why everybody was yelling from the rooftop, WNBA, blah, blah, blah. It's 28 years young. There were a lot of leagues that it took to year 30 to really make a growth. So it's coming, whether it comes at 28, 29, 31, and we've seen it. The crazy thing that I think it's little fixes, and this is where my role is to question and to push and to encourage. ABC, it was the first time they put the women's NCAA game on ABC. Was the first year that Caitlin Clark made the championship game. Are you surprised that the viewership was up? Are you surprised that people actually saw the product? It was buried for so long on ESPN. There's so many times during the NCAA game and even the WNBA playoffs, I turn on, the NBA doesn't want to clash with NFL playoffs or NFL opening week. So why would we then put the WNBA, I don't care if that's the time slot that they're giving you. Let's fight for another one or let's find something else. And I think with streaming, with social media, now it's more front and center. You're seeing the leaders of, and I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this. So
Go.
So now you look at statistics within social media and following, and it's Paige Beckers. She had more followings than Suggs, who was a top 4 pick. She had more following than Anthony Edwards when he was coming into the league. So now you're able to look at social media and see what the following is, the clicks, the likes, what they're selling, you know, what people are looking for. And you're now able to see that, okay, wait, women can sell things. And I think that is my role, is to continue to push the envelope of what that looks like, of visibility, but also like having relationships to be able to build what you're trying to build.
So one of the relationships that we have watched you develop, because you've done it on television, is with some of the biggest personalities in NBA history. So I want to talk a little bit about broadcasting. You've had some experience. I want you guys to talk about this a little bit. A lot of people, maybe who didn't know you when you were playing, now know you from giving it to Shaq. We know you guys are good friends. We've seen the video of you hugging him after the championship game. Tell us how all that came about, because it's not traditionally a natural progression to be like a star women's basketball player and then be chopping it up on the best watched studio television show in sports.
I have to pinch myself sometimes because those guys were on my wall. And coming into a situation like that, I'm a basketball hoop head. Like, I watch the game and then I watch all the highlights and the analysis after. Then the next morning I wake up and I watch the analysis of the game previous. Like, I drive my family crazy with sports just being on television, every type of sort. And to be able to sit at that desk and talk basketball with people that were on your wall, but also talk basketball with people that played it differently than you. And I don't mean just NBA, WNBA. The battle I have with Shaq all the time is he's like, just get the ball and score. And I'm like, Shaq, not everybody is 7 foot, 300 pounds. Like, it's not barbecue chicken for me. I got to do a couple moves, you know? And so to be able to sit at a desk like that and to chop it up with them on a nightly basis, it's super special. And I think early on, I was a little like starstruck. But as time went on, I realized, like, I'm not trying to be one of the guys. I'm trying to be one of the players. And once we kind of understood that and the perspective, they don't take anything I say to heart. We go back and forth. And again, my brothers prepared me for it, because I can take a lot of jokes when they're making fun of my outfits or making fun of how I walk. They say I walk like Kenny Smith because my knees are, I'm bow-legged. So I can take all of that.
So talk to me a little bit about your preparation. Are you watching games? Are you taking notes? Do you have a coach? Walk us through that a little bit.
It's so interesting because I think it's changed over time. There's a lot of broadcasters that go by feel. And I think that's a skill. That's a skill set. Like you think about Reggie Miller, he's able to paint a picture of what the game is, of what this person is thinking or whatever. And you think about Stan Van Gundy, who's more of like stats and like all of these things. And, you know, I'll be honest, I think Shaq would come out and tell you he doesn't prepare when he comes to the show. Half the time he doesn't know who's playing. You know what I mean? And that's a skill set in itself. So I think for me, I just had to develop over time my way of preparation. And I always have basketball on. I like knowing backstories. Scouting report is huge for me. So I know what your go-to move is. And so I'm going to bring it up. Kenny Smith told me something really cool. He said, when you're preparing, make sure that you're preparing to speak to the grandma, that you're prepared to speak to the person that is a basketball head, and you're prepared to speak to the novice. And so if you can say one thing and be able to speak and touch to all of those people, then you've done a good job. And so I've tried to continue to prepare so that I'm ready for that on television.
So what do you do next in broadcast? I mean, do you have as your goal setting, as your Google calendaring, like what do you think about when it comes to the media world?
Baby Hair Productions is a production company I started. First passion project was Title IX documentary that we were able to complete and do with Turner. I think it's growing that and kind of being behind the camera and being able to develop stories and storytelling, because I think that's where you really impact people and change, is being able to tell stories of what's come before. And whether it's in women in sports, whether it's women in business, whether it's whatever it is, you know, I would love to continue to tell those stories and to be able to, you know, produce and to do things like that.
Well, and it's interesting too, when you think about, and we talk about this all the time, that it feels like one of the next big steps forward for women's sports is the so-called shoulder programming, right? You know, the stuff that goes, you know, you guys are talking about for baseball, for the NBA, there is all the pregame and postgame and the storytelling that goes around it. Some of that has been, I would argue, missing with women's sports. So it feels like a big business opportunity, if I dare say so.
I just think it's so funny because you talk about, you know, like the pre and post game shows. I tuned in the week that Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant were going to play each other, because all week, all I heard was they didn't like each other. It was all these stories. And it's so funny because we turn women's sports into these like the caddy, and all this stuff. And it's like, no, men's sports is just called something different. It's the same. It's a synonym of whatever it is. And
have we met Stephen A. Smith? I mean, hello.
I'm like, it's a synonym of what you're calling women's sports. It's all the storylines behind the story. And so now for women's sports to be able to get pre and post game shows, I think we're still kind of figuring out what that looks like. And I think we're still a little sensitive of actually saying what needs to be said, because we're so protective of women's sports, where sometimes it is hard to watch because that wasn't a good pass. It wasn't a nice move, you know? So I think we're still figuring out our lane to grow the sport, but also be honest and critique in a way that the viewers would love to watch.
Which is a corollary to the whole argument around women's sports, right? That, you know, you had a lot of, I mean, you see this in your work. We've seen it in the W, we've seen it in NWSL, where a lot of people were like, oh, we're just really rooting for these girls and like we're going to put some money in from the foundation and hope for the best, versus private equity coming in, a Mark Lazar, a Joe and Clara Sy, you know, coming in and being like, no. We're going to make some money here. We're going to get butts in the seats. We're going to sell the media rights for a bunch of money. And this is going to be a real business going forward. I mean, that's your interest, it sounds like.
The thing that irks me the most is if you go to an NWSL game, it'll say, look, he's supporting the NWSL. But if you go to a Chicago Fire MLS game, it's, look, he's front and center watching these guys work, you know? So it's all in the conversation and how we are able to figure out what our fans want and need. They want to see superstars. You want to see people courtside, but it's also like the verbiage that we're using in social media posts and how we look at women's sports as a business. It's not support. This isn't a charity. I loved when Claire Usai said, I'm trying to make money.
Yeah.
This isn't something that I'm coming in and I'm going to blow. I'm just going to use my money to, you know, further the cause. No, this isn't a cause. This is a business opportunity. And now that mindset, I think, is shifting. It's shifting in volleyball with the amount of people. I mean, 97,000 people went and watched a volleyball game. Put that in perspective. And I'm just watching, like, my daughter played front and center at homecoming their volleyball team was out under the lights playing, and it was young boys. I mean, I could almost cry looking at young boys scream for the team. So it's like now we're having a generation of men that have grown up with women as role models and in leadership positions. And now from a business mindset, we have to take all of that information, the blueprint's there, and just not be stupid. Honestly, like let's just not be stupid. And I think we could get this.
All right, let's not be stupid. That's a great way to
not be stupid.
Yeah, let's not be
rapid
stupid.
fire.
All right, now we're going to move to rapid fire, which hopefully won't be stupid. But we'll see. All right, I'll start and then we'll bounce it back and forth. And just, we'll keep it tight. What's one word to describe your deal-making style?
Intuitive? I don't know.
Inquisitive?
Inquisitive. There you go. Inquisitive.
In a deal, what's more important, your instincts or data?
Instincts.
Who's your dream deal-making partner?
I'm with him, Mark Lazar.
Who's your dream co-host on the NBA broadcast?
Allen Iverson.
Oh, that's a good one. What's the best piece of advice you've received on deal-making or business?
Listen to all the facts, but then ultimately you make your decision.
What's the worst business advice you've ever received?
Listen to everyone else and do what they want and do what they want you to do.
What's your hype song before you go into a big meeting or negotiation?
I spray some Angel perfume in honor of Coach Summit, and I play What More Can I Say by Jay-Z.
Okay. You can only watch one sport for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
Basketball.
What team do you want to see win a championship more than any?
Chicago Bulls.
What's a fun fact about yourself that your teammates would be surprised to hear? Teammates, business associates, whoever.
I can juggle.
Oh, that's a good one.
There you go.
All right, Candace, this was so fun.
No,
Thank
I had
you
a blast.
so much. This
I
was really
appreciate
good.
you all. I really do. And I hope that we can sit down at some point, dinner,
Absolutely.
and chat and do this. Yeah.
Chop it up.
Be great.
Thanks so much for listening to The Deal. If you never want to miss a story, become a Bloomberg.com subscriber today. Check out our special intro offer right now at Bloomberg.com/podcast offer or click the link in the show notes. You'll also unlock deep reporting, data, and analysis from Bloomberg reporters all around the world.
The Deal is a production from Bloomberg Podcasts and Bloomberg Originals. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. Our producers are Anna Mazarakis, Stacey Wong, and Lizzie Phillip. Original music and engineering by Blake Maples. Our managing editor is David E. Ravella. Our executive producers are Jason Kelly, Brendan Francis Newnham, Jordan Opplinger, Trey Shallowhorn, Kyle Kramer, Andrew Barden, Kelly LaFerriere, and Ashley Honig. Sage Bauman is our head of podcasts. Additional support from Rachel Scaramazzino and Elena Sasangelis. Joshua DeVoe is our director of photography. Rubab Shakir is our creative director. Art direction is from Jacqueline Kessler. Casting by Julia Manns. Our associate producer is Natasha Abelard. Camera operation by Stephen Neal and Linnea Jolson. Our gaffer is Kelly Porterfield, and our grip is Justin Birch. Katia Vanoy is our video editor. Listen to The Deal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also tune in to the video companion on Bloomberg Originals and on Bloomberg TV.